If you take away guns, she wants to take away everyone's gun. If you take away guns, can't do it because people need the guns for protection. Now, entertainment, they want it, hunting, they want, different things. But they need weapons for protection in this country.
When Donald Trump entered the political scene, he didn't just step into debates about the Second Amendment. He transformed the conversation entirely.
Hillary wants to essentially abolish the Second Amendment. By the way, and if she gets to pick her judges, nothing you can do, folks.
For him, gun rights weren't merely a constitutional guarantee. They were a rallying cry, a symbol of freedom, and a cornerstone of his identity as a leader. Trump turned the Second Amendment into more than a policy issue. It became a cultural battle line, a tool for energizing his base, and a defining feature of his presidency. But how did he do it? And what was the lasting impact? Today, we're unpacking how Donald Trump redefined the Second Amendment in ways that will shape American politics for years to come. Turning the Second Amendment into a political identity. Before Trump, gun rights were a major issue in American politics, but they were often treated with caution by most leaders. Then came Trump, who wasted no time in claiming the Second Amendment as a central pillar of his political brand. At rallies, he'd fire up crowds by declaring, "Your Second Amendment rights are under attack." For Trump, this wasn't just campaign talk, it was a call to arms for his supporters. Unlike previous leaders who addressed gun rights as a policy debate, Trump weaponized the Second Amendment as a political identity. By framing gun ownership as a symbol of freedom, self-reliance, and patriotism, he gave his supporters more than just a reason to vote. He gave them a cause to believe in. Trump repeatedly accused Democrats of trying to take away our guns, a message that resonated with millions who already feared government overreach. This approach created a movement. Gun rights became more than a legal discussion, they were transformed into an emotional and cultural rallying cry. Through speeches, tweets, and partnerships with organizations like the NRA, Trump positioned himself as the ultimate defender of American gun owners, solidifying his reputation as a leader who wasn't afraid to take sides on polarizing issues. From rhetoric to action, Trump's policy impact. While Trump's fiery rhetoric captivated his audience, his presidency also delivered significant action on the Second Amendment. Perhaps his most enduring impact came through his judicial appointments. During his time in office, Trump nominated 3 Supreme Court justices, Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett. These appointments fundamentally reshaped the court, creating a conservative majority that would later influence key decisions on gun rights. One such decision was the 2022 case New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin, which struck down restrictive concealed carry laws in New York. This ruling marked a major victory for gun rights advocates and reflected the shift in judicial philosophy that Trump's appointments had brought to the court. For Trump supporters, it was proof that his promises weren't just talk. He was delivering lasting change. Beyond the judiciary, Trump's administration also rolled back certain regulations that gun rights advocates viewed as overreach. His team loosened restrictions on firearm exports and resisted calls for stricter background checks, even as debates over gun control intensified in the wake of mass shootings. For many in his base, this steadfast opposition to gun control measures was a defining feature of his presidency. However, not all Trump's actions were welcomed by hardcore gun rights activists. After the 2017 Las Vegas mass shooting, Trump enacted a ban on bump stocks, devices that allow semi-automatic weapons to fire more rapidly. While some saw this as a necessary response to a national tragedy, others in his base viewed it as a betrayal of his commitment to protecting gun rights. This tension highlighted the fine line Trump had to walk in navigating a deeply polarized issue. Guns as culture, Trump's role in a broader identity shift. One of Trump's most significant contributions to the Second Amendment debate wasn't just in policy, it was in culture. Under his leadership, guns became more than tools for self-defense or hunting. They became symbols of identity, independence, and resistance to perceived threats. Trump's rhetoric often connected gun ownership to broader values like freedom, patriotism, and the American way of life. He famously warned, "They're not just coming for your guns, they're coming for your way of life." This message resonated particularly strongly in rural and conservative communities where firearms have long been tied to tradition and self-reliance. For many of Trump's supporters, owning a gun wasn't just about exercising a constitutional right. It was about standing up against what they saw as a growing threat from liberal elites, urban culture, and government overreach. This cultural shift was further reinforced by the firearms industry, which embraced Trump's brand with enthusiasm. Gun manufacturers released special edition Trump firearms, and his slogans appeared on everything from rifle cases to ammunition. These products weren't just memorabilia, they were symbols of loyalty to Trump and his vision of America. For his supporters, defending the Second Amendment became a way to push back against broader cultural changes they felt were eroding traditional values. Guns became a symbol of their resistance, and Trump was the leader who gave their cause a powerful voice. The backlash and polarization of the debate. While Trump energized his base around the Second Amendment, his approach also deepened divisions in the national gun debate. Gun control advocates criticized his rhetoric as fear-mongering and his policies as reckless. They argued that his administration's resistance to reforms like universal background checks and red flag laws contributed to a growing epidemic of gun violence in America. Mass shootings during Trump's presidency, such as those in Parkland, Florida, and El Paso, Texas, reignited calls for stricter gun control. Yet Trump, ever loyal to his base, rarely resisted these efforts, instead emphasizing mental health reforms and other non-legislative solutions. For his critics, this approach was inadequate. For his supporters, it was evidence of his commitment to protecting their rights. Even within his own camp, Trump faced challenges. His decision to ban bump stocks alienated some gun rights purists who saw it as a dangerous precedent. These activists argued that any restriction, even on a niche product, could open the door to further erosion of gun rights. Despite this, Trump maintained his broader appeal by continuing to position himself as the strongest advocate for the Second Amendment in modern political history. Trump's enduring legacy on gun rights. Trump may no longer be in office, but his impact on the Second Amendment is far from over. His judicial appointments continue to influence major legal decisions, and the cultural movement he fostered remains a powerful force in American politics. Today, Republican candidates seeking conservative support often echo Trump's aggressive stance on gun rights, ensuring that his legacy lives on. More broadly, Trump redefined what it means to defend the Second Amendment. He turned gun rights into a cultural and political identity, one that's deeply tied to broader battles over freedom, tradition, and government authority. Whether you see him as a hero or a polarizing figure, there's no denying that Trump changed the conversation around gun rights in America. The role of fear in Trump's Second Amendment messaging. One of Trump's most effective strategies in redefining the Second Amendment was his ability to tap into and amplify the fears of his supporters. Fear of government overreach, fear of cultural erosion, and fear of losing a way of life were central themes in his rhetoric. Trump didn't just talk about protecting gun rights. He warned that those rights were constantly under attack. He positioned himself as the last line of defense against a government and a Democratic Party like that. In his framing, wanted to disarm law-abiding citizens. This messaging resonated deeply with millions of gun owners. For many, Trump's dire warnings felt plausible, especially in the context of high-profile pushes for gun control following mass shootings. Trump capitalized on this anxiety by portraying his opponents as radical and out of touch with real America. He often invoked the imagery of a dystopian future where only the government and criminals had guns, leaving ordinary citizens defenseless. Trump's use of fear wasn't limited to policy discussions. It was woven into his broader cultural narrative. He often tied gun rights to issues like border security, crime, and the perceived decline of traditional American values. In doing so, he made the Second Amendment a focal point in a larger cultural battle. This approach not only energized his base, but also broadened the appeal of gun rights advocacy beyond traditional conservative circles. Critics argued that this strategy exacerbated divisions and stoked unnecessary panic, but for Trump, the results were clear. His supporters saw him as a fighter who understood their fears and was willing to take a stand. By leveraging fear, Trump solidified his position as the ultimate defender of the Second Amendment and deepened the emotional connection his supporters had to their rights. Donald Trump didn't just support the Second Amendment, he transformed it into a defining feature for his presidency and a cornerstone of his legacy. Through fiery rhetoric, judicial appointments, and a cultural shift, he reshaped how Americans think about gun rights. For his supporters, he was a champion of freedom, a defender of tradition, and a leader who wasn't afraid to take a stand. For his critics, he was a polarizing figure whose actions deepened divisions on one of the nation's most contentious issues. As the debate over gun rights continues to evolve, one thing is certain. The Trump era left a lasting mark on the Second Amendment. Whether his influence is seen as a triumph or a challenge to overcome depends on which side of the debate you're on. But either way, Donald Trump's redefinition of the Second Amendment will be remembered as one of the most significant chapters in the history of American politics. What are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments below. Until then, subscribe to the channel and stay on the lookout for more.